So at first, I'd like to give some background of our research. What were the main interests determined the needs for the project. Rural depopulation is not a new phenomenon, but recent deepening and spreading of population decline raised interest at EU level and across the member states. This interest is coming from the assumption that population change reflects the overall condition and performance of rural areas. These processes also make a growing visibility of rural shrinking and increasing awareness of new opportunities associated with technological, economic, and social changes, which is calling for direct tailored policy responses aiming at mitigating or adapting to shrinking. And there's also a need of identifying shrinking rural regions and getting acquainted with their demographic, social, economic, or even environmental challenges. Our research project aimed to support these goals and to contribute to these, I will give you some insights on this in this presentation. During our research, we identified patterns of various population dynamics across Europe, from extensive increase of population, mostly in urban areas, to severe population decline. We identified population shrinkage as substantial and sustained demographic process, depopulation process, a significant proportion of population loss over one generation, which mostly characterize rural areas. About the extension of rural shrinkage in Europe, we can stress out some measures. Among predominantly rural or intermediate NUTS-3 regions of the European Union, 60% can be considered as shrinking. This is 40% of the area of the EU and 1/3 of its population. We identified different patterns considering the components of population decline. Legacy shrinkage caused by age structure effects and natural decrease is equally common in Southern, Northern Europe and the East Central European countries, while active shrinkage driven by current outmigration is more present in the Baltic states and East Central European peripheries. We understood rural shrinkage not just as a simple demographic process, but also as a complex phenomenon, a multifaceted syndrome of decline, often but not necessarily leading to vicious circles, which tend to be self-perpetuating. In our analysis, we attempted to embed the chronological and structural dynamics of simple shrinking, and also make reflection of on 4 dimensions, so-called casual narratives of rural shrinking, with the definition and selection of variables in our analysis. We ended up with a classification reflecting on the economic profile, the productivity, and the demographic dynamics of these shrinking rural regions. The main distinctive features of this typology are the east-west and the central periphery cleavages at continental level. To dig more into the causes and drivers of rural shrinking, during the research we carried out 8 case studies representing different types of shrinkage, like active legacy and different complex types across Europe. 4 cases were selected from East Central Europe, 1 from former East Germany, 1 from the northern periphery from Finland, and 2 from southern peripheries from Spain and Greece. Based on findings of the case studies, our research team identified 2 pathways or models of rural shrinkage. In the northern and southern model, shrinkage is triggered by geographical position of rural areas, such as remoteness, sparse population, border areas, inner peripherality, and also by long-term spatial processes, most related to urbanization and the post-global financial crisis, which processes led to the peripherization of these rural areas. In the Eastern model, these triggers of peripherization also stand, but these processes were aggravated by historical cataclysms like the communist era, fall of state socialism, or the Balkan Wars in Croatia, aiming to eradicate existing social and economic structures. These effects caused an increased vulnerability of rural communities towards social and economic marginalization, which became a crucial feature of rural shrinkage in these countries. Based on our local and EU-level experiences, we attempted to identify and highlight policy needs in tackling rural shrinkage, which are on the spectrum between mitigation of shrinkage and the adaptation to it. Our main assumption is that rural shrinkage is a complex and heterogeneous problem, which needs complex policy approaches to be tackled. We also found that current EU policies are too focused on promoting regional economic development and don't address underlying causes of rural shrinkage. Our policy recommendations were mainly addressed to the EU level to achieve better targeting and coordination, the simplification of EU funding processes, and initiating longer-term EU projects. But for local and regional levels, our main recommendations emphasize the need for closing the gap between EU policy and local intervention, and the need for more policy guidance for regions regarding different mitigation and adaptation strategies available for coping with rural shrinkage. When invited to speak, I was requested to tell more about the Hungarian experience and context of rural shrinkage, policies addressing demographic decline, as well as rural development policies in Hungary, to make a comparison with Norway from another part of Europe. So, in the second half of my presentation, I will share some aspects of these issues with you. Hungary has a long-term experience with shrinkage. As far as I know, it was the first country in Europe facing population decline, started in 1981. And since then, the country has an overall population loss of 1 million inhabitants. Moreover, future projections on demographic dynamics of Hungary expect further 1.52 million people loss until 2050. Shrinkage in Hungary is not only a rural phenomenon. Smaller municipalities and bigger cities, such as Budapest or other regional centers, also face severe population decline. Speaking about rural population dynamics, it has to be emphasized that in rural Hungary, only suburban areas around Budapest and regional centers are territories with specific position grow. But overall, rural shrinkage hits the most both inner and external peripheral areas of the countries and territories facing socioeconomic peripherization. To draw a pathway on rural shrinkage in Hungary, several triggers of this complex phenomenon should be highlighted. The first demographic transition resulted in the decline of both fertility and mortality in Hungary, but it was still accompanied by poor health status and lower life expectancy of the population, which limited natural increase. During the 20th century, there were also radical political turns with profound social and economic consequences. First of all, these are related to the communist era in Hungary. From the Stalinist dictatorship to the consolidation of state socialism, the collectivization of peasant property, the extensive industrialization, the administrative reforms, and forced concentration of municipalities generated waves of rural population outflows to urban areas. After the fall of state socialism, during the post-socialist transition, selective outmigration due to the drop in employment opportunities fueled more population decline in rural areas. And this migration effect have been aggravated by growing effects of negative natural changes related to the second demographic transition, by the durably low birth rates and high degrees of diversity in family status. And finally, the global financial crisis has also generated a wave of immigration from Hungary, which was coincided with one of the main impacts of the EU accession, the opening of Western labor markets. So hundreds of thousands of mostly younger Hungarians left the country to have an employment, mainly in Germany, the United Kingdom, or in Austria. So in Hungary, rural shrinking is a long-term, current and hot issue. And in the country, almost every public policy impacts directly or indirectly this issue of demographic decline. Among these, regional and rural development policies have the greatest impact, since they have the greatest allocated resources, mainly from EU funds. Among regional policies affecting rural shrinkage, economic development and innovation, human resources development, and territorial and settlement development have the most significant effect, which are focusing mainly on job creation and the broadening of employment possibilities, the improvement of public service provision, mainly healthcare and education, and the improvement in quality of life in rural areas by various actions. In Hungary, rural development policy in the past programming period was mostly related to the common agricultural policy of the EU. It had 19 measures under 6 priorities, but these were mostly connected to agriculture and forestry, and only a minority of these measures with a strongly limited budget was relevant concerning rural shrinkage via job creation, small-scale infrastructural improvements, and development of basic services. Among them, the most important was LEADER, which has an ambivalent status. On the one hand, this really is a place-tailored rural development program, but it wasn't a success in Hungary due to poor funding, with only the minimum budget possible, and bad governance with delayed implementation. Besides policies related more to EU regional policies, there are also national policies directly addressing demographic decline. The most important is related to family policies and has taken form as the Family Protection Action Plan since 2016. This includes tax policies by providing personal income tax exemption for different social groups and tax benefits, direct allowances, soft loans and interest subsidy associated with housing and car purchase, and other measures like the interest-free baby loan, different supports for daily childcare services. Another national program for tackling rural shrinkage in Hungarian is the Hungarian Village Program, initiated in 2019. With the aim of slowing down negative demographic trends through better service provision, enhanced connectivity, and significant financial support for access to housing. It provides notable support for rural settlements with less than 5,000 inhabitants and gained great popularity because it fulfilled tailored to needs of rural areas where these had not been met in the last decades. The program is also simple, its implementation is swift, and it was addressed to shortages of human capital and public service provision in rural areas. Nevertheless, informally, it is just a compensation for municipal development resources taken away due to the centralization efforts of the Hungarian government. And the last slide. In Hungary, there are also policy tools either missing or are in a pilot phase, which would also could be important for tackling rural shrinkage. For instance, in Hungary, there's no ITI, which could have a real impact in rural areas due to its territorialized development concept. A pilot program is the Smart Village program, which was initiated in 2018 for restoring the demographic balance of local communities and counter aging and shrinkage with a sustainable micro-regional economic model and an attractive environment for potential newcomers. Now I think it's called Digital Village Program and still in a starting phase. Finally, I also have to mention the Hungarian Town program launched in 2020, which focuses on needs of rural towns with 5,000 to 20,000 inhabitants. While general expectations are great towards this program, this is still a direct government support based on individual decision. And that's all I wanted to say about the Hungarian policy context of shrinkage. Thank you very much.